The rules will apply regardless of the flight's purpose, whether it's for work, for research, or for fun. There are two main categories in the new regulations: rules for basic operations and rules for advanced operations. The main criteria that determine whether advanced or basic rules apply are if a drone flies near bystanders or in controlled airspace, such as near an airport or aerodrome. So we have certainly taken note of what happened at Gatwick and possibly at Heathrow yesterday, and let me begin by saying that it is a serious criminal offense to interfere with the operations of an airport, and even more, to cause risk to aircraft carrying passengers that are either landing or taking off. So it's a very serious crime, which is subject to not only a fine but also imprisonment. Having said that, we are working with different groups, including the airports, but also security agencies, to examine what kinds of countermeasures would be applicable depending on the type of drone and the circumstances. Obviously, for security reasons, I can't go into details on that, but this is something that we are looking at extremely seriously because it represents potentially a dangerous situation. Not only that, but it also represents a significant slowdown in airport activities, which puts a very large number of people in a situation where they are missing their flights or they're missing important meetings. So this is something that we're looking at very seriously.
How these regulations are going to get people who don't have goodwill. And I also had a second question just about the cost of the licensing process.
Sure. Well, on the first question, we will see how respectful people are, but we have Transport Canada inspectors, but we realize we can't cover the entire country just with Transport Canada inspectors. So we're working with the RCMP, and we will be approaching other police services across the country so that they understand that there are new rules with, in fact, fines and possibly imprisonment depending on what laws are broken. This is very serious business. If you put an object in the air, in the airspace of this country, you are in fact piloting it, and if you cause an accident that can have enormous repercussions, then you have to realize that there will be a price to pay for that. On the issue of people obtaining their registration and passing their exam and also getting their pilot certificate, there are small costs associated with it, and those are strictly so that we can cover the administrative costs at the Government of Canada for somebody who applies for a license or takes the exam, and those are just to cover those costs.
You also said that in some ways this would reduce the administrative burden.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how this would do that.
Yeah, so there are at the moment, in many cases, people have to get special certificates, operational certificates to operate their drones, and they have to come to Transport Canada, and there's a lot of paperwork, and it depends on the use of it. But with the new rules, there'll be a much smaller group that will be required to maintain these special operations flight certificates for the more complex tasks that some of the drones are going to be developed for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Alison Northcott with CBC.
Yeah.
You mentioned a small administrative cost, but what will be the process actually for obtaining one of these licenses?
You go online. You go to Transport Canada. There's a website there, and go to drone safety. Go to drone, and it's all laid out as of today. How you go about between now and the 1st of June, taking a written exam, getting a registration. You're going to be given a number. You will, if you pass the written exam, get a pilot certificate. And by the way, you will carry that pilot certificate and that registration number with you so that if a policeman stops you and says, you're flying that drone, show me that you have the certificate and show me that you have the registration to prove that you are not just somebody who went and bought it and put it in the air.
And will the government provide study aids for people who want to take that test?
One of the things that we're encouraging, we did not make the training mandatory prior to taking the test, but there are two options. One option is to go to, there are a number of flight schools, drone flight schools across the country, and we would encourage people who are serious about operating their drones to take some of that training before they actually do the exams. There's a lot of useful information that's on the website, but if somebody wants to do a little bit of training beforehand, before they actually start using their drone, we would encourage them to contact the flight training schools.
Good morning, Geneviève Beauchemin from CTV News.
Yes.
I'm wondering how these regulations compare to regulations in other countries.
Very similar.
Did you follow a model in particular?
We of course, make up our own minds in Canada about what we consider to be the necessary rules to ensure safety and at the same time to not hamper innovation. So that's kind of the philosophical approach that we take. At the same time, we are neighbors to the United States, and at Transport Canada we have a large number of regulations, and we try to harmonize them wherever we can with our neighbors in the States, because a lot of Canadians will take their drones to the States and vice versa. And I can say to you that we're very, very similar. This harmonization, of course, has lots of practical benefits, and we're very similar to them. But it's not a carbon copy. We don't take the approach of just doing a carbon copy.
Would the licensing be something that's very similar to a boater's license, for instance?
In the sense that you know, you need to demonstrate that you understand the basics when you take that exam, and that you are taking responsibility by getting a registration, and you're putting that registration number on your drone itself. So yes, there are parallels between the two.
Wondering if you could explain the height maximum, 122 meters. Is there significance to that height where stuff happens above there that we don't want drones going on up there?
Well, it's a height that we judge to be a practical one to allow people to get their drones up a little bit into the sky. It's about 400 feet. But at the same time, we are, because you know that with respect to aerodromes and airports, that they can't come closer to the airport than 3 nautical miles, which is about 5.7 kilometers. And the way airspace operates around airports, it's like an inverted cake, wedding cake. And so the higher you get up and closer, the more you have a chance of infringing into that airspace. So if you're staying outside the 3 nautical miles, going up to 122 meters is a reasonable height to allow you to use your drone in a practical way, but at the same time is going to minimize the possibility that you're going to create an infringement on the airspace. Now, you can go beyond that if you go to Transport Canada and get a special flight operating license to operate above that, because there are certain cases where drones may need to work higher than that.
In order to get that allowance, you'll have to create a justification for it? It's not just anybody who could go? Or?
Yeah, no, you'll have to go to Transport Canada and say what you want to use your drone for a specific purpose, and they will then look at it. And if it involves going into airspace, you'll have to also, that'll have to be coordinated with NAVCAN, NAVCAN, which controls our airspace in this country. But also, it will depend very much on the drone and its capability. Some drones are more capable than other drones, and some are, if you like, in a sense, have more capacity to deal with more demanding environments than others. And we'll be looking at the kind of drone that is in question too.
And then just finally, how harsh will the penalties be for, say you buy a drone, you don't register it, you fly it, you get caught, what's the penalty?
Well, on paper, it's between $1,000 and $3,000 for an individual. But it depends on whether you deliberately do a Gatwick kind of thing. Then we're talking much more serious and imprisonment. And if it's a corporation that is using it, it can be up to $25,000.
And are there specific measures or plans for specific measures to protect airports specifically?
Well, this is something that I touched upon in an earlier question. We are working with airports and with security organizations to address the issue. There are people who will, because they just don't know how to operate properly, will wander through an airfield. That is people who have not done their homework and are careless. There are that kind of people. But that's quite different from somebody who deliberately puts their drone in the middle of just above a runway in a very busy airport with the object of just creating the kind of situation that occurred at Gatwick. And those are two very different circumstances, and we will take the necessary measures depending on what kind of situation exists.
So we can assume that, people who are flying drones professionally are going to look into the legislation, but for the
Yeah.
unwitting, families who pick up a drone for Christmas, what are some rules of thumb that people can keep in mind, to make sure that they're not, endangering people and following the rules?
Well, if it's over 250 grams, the rule of thumb is actually a requirement for them to go online and to figure out what they're going to do so that they can pass the exam and how they have to register their drone. Those are not suggestions, those are requirements if
Yeah.
it's above 250 grams. If it's a much smaller one than that, and there are some very tiny ones, then common sense is what prevails. They shouldn't fly their drone out of sight. If it goes behind a building and they lose control of it, it becomes a dangerous object, or if they go up into the clouds, or if they go near an airport, those are common sense things. You have to use that kind of common sense, because if it fails and it falls out of the sky and lands on somebody or on their car or their house or something, even a small object can cause a problem.
Okay, the students outside who have the drone say that we can't fly them in the city. Is that a requirement?
Yeah, the requirement is that you don't fly them within 30 meters of people and not above 400 feet, as I said before, unless you have special dispensation through Transport Canada. That has to be worked with Transport Canada. And of course, not within 3 nautical miles of an airport, or within 1 nautical mile, which is about 1.9 kilometers of a helicopter pad.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.